to intake when the shelter isn't the answer. I'm Lynn Fridley, Program Manager for Maddie's Institute. Our speaker tonight is Wiley Stem, Assistant City Manager for Waco, Texas. In the webcast tonight, Wiley will share his inspiring story of collaboration and life-saving. Here's a few housekeeping items we need to go over. Please take a look at the left-hand side of your screen where you'll see a Q&A window. That's where you'll ask questions during the presentation. Wiley's presentation will be short, allowing more time for questions, but don't hold your questions until the end. Questions asked in the last few minutes will probably not be processed in time for a response. If you need any help with your connection during the presentation, you can click on the help icon at the bottom of your screen, and the green file icon contains the presentation handout and a printable certificate of attendance for people attending this live event. Before we start, I want to say a few words about Maddie's Fund. We are the nation's leading funder of shelter medicine education, and it is our goal to help save the lives of all of our nation's healthy and treatable shelter dogs and cats. Our founders, Dave and Cheryl Duffield, were going through a difficult time in their life, but they were sustained by the unconditional love of their little dog named Maddie. She gave them such joy that they promised her that if they ever made any money, they would give back to her kind. Their dreams did come true, and they made good on their promise by creating Maddie's Fund in honor of their cherished companion and the special bond that they shared. Please use what you learn here tonight to continue your life-saving work for animals. Wiley, thank you for being here this evening.
It's great to be here, Lynn, and good evening, everyone. It's on me, right, Lynn?
Yes, it's on you. Go ahead.
Okay, all right, great. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to tell Waco's story. It's been quite a journey that we've gone on over the last 2.5 years, and I wanted to give the group a little background on kind of where we started and what some of our challenges were. First of all, as Lynn mentioned, I'm an assistant city manager here at Waco. I've been here for 39 years next month, and I have 14 operating departments. The smallest budgeted department that I have is the animal shelter, and it's the one I pay the most attention to and spend the most time on because of the passion that's grown in me over the last 2.5 years over the challenges that Waco and the surrounding communities have faced with strays. And I was born and raised in Waco, so this is my hometown. And it's been really inspiring to be involved in this. This is not something that I asked to get involved in. When we had to engage on the shelter issue 2.5 years ago, our city manager assigned this to me because one of my operating departments is the police department. That's where animal control is. So that's how I got involved in this. And I'm clicking to the first slide here to kind of give a little bit more background about our shelter. Our shelter serves 260,000 people, 15 cities, and the entire county of McLennan. We have contracts with all of those cities, and we have a contract with the county to accept all the strays that their animal control officers pick up, and we accept animals on a surrender basis from all those same cities in the county. We basically inherited that group of cities and counties from the Humane Society, who had run the shelter up until December of 2012. And the Humane Society, a great group of people that raise a lot of money every year for the honor of helping our community with the strays and running the shelter. But the shelter and all the areas they were trying to serve just overwhelmed them, and they ran short of resources, and the shelter belonged to the city of Waco, so we stepped in, wrote a new agreement with them, and really established a much better partnership starting in December of 2012. we operate the shelter, the staff that takes care of the animals and handles the intake, and it does the day-to-day maintenance and operation of the shelter is all City of Waco staff. Most of them, at least initially, were staff that had worked for the Humane Society. And the Humane Society operates the adoptions, reclaim, foster, and rescue side of the operation. We provide office staff and facilities and for them, pay all the utility bills, and support them every way we can possibly do it. And they have done a great job of moving the animals out and getting really good agreements established with rescues all over Texas to help us really improve our live exit rate. And we've been above 90% live exit for 3 straight months now, and that is I think just short of a miracle, because when we took the shelter in December of 2012, the previous year we had an intake of a little over 10,000 animals. We had over 6,000 of them were euthanized. And we are now, as I mentioned, just barely above 90% live exit. And we think we're just doing a much better job with the health of the animal and the quality of the care there. And then the Humane Society has been allowed to focus on what they're best at, and their fundraising demands are not nearly as tough for them. And then we have a really tough stray population here in Waco, and we've got a demographic here that is pretty tough to deal with from a stray population standpoint, and we only have 4 animal control officers. And so we were really challenged on the stray side. I think we could have kept 15 animal control officers busy and just continuously bring animals into the shelter. When we started looking at how we would improve this, I think one of the first things we did was one of our partners here in the community, we have an Animal Welfare Alliance, one of our partners in the community, ABC, our Animal Birth Control Clinic, Carrie Keel, contacted Target Zero Institute and had them come in and make a presentation to our animal welfare community, and they did a great job and gave us some things to think about and some ideas that we could improve our situation. One of their recommendations was that we draft a cat-friendly ordinance, which we did about 6 months after they left. We have an animal welfare advisory board, and they work together along with the rescue groups and the other animal welfare alliance partners to draft this ordinance. Once we got the ordinance drafted, which really shifted our focus on community cats from capturing them, bringing them to the shelter, which once you get them to the shelter, there's pretty much nothing good that can happen. We shifted the focus more toward TNR, working with a variety of volunteer groups and partners to do a much more friendly approach and not bring them to the shelter. At the same time, we put that ordinance together. Our council, our city council, had really engaged well on the process of us transferring the shelter from the Humane Society to the city. It provided me really all the support I could ever ask for in getting that done, and they had been very supportive of a new ordinance. Prior to that time, we had an ordinance that just, when it came to spay neuter or TNR, just required an intact animal permit, and that was a very unsuccessful approach. So we drafted a new cat-friendly ordinance. We got it adopted in August of 2012, and then we took an extra step of going to the cities that we had contracts with and to the county and to get them to adopt the same ordinance. So we had a consistent approach with all of our partners, so that they wouldn't be bringing the community cats to the shelter either, and they would be lined up with the volunteer groups and the cat organizations in the community to handle the community cats in a different way, and not bring them to the shelter. And that's been very successful, probably the most important component. Now, we still get complaints about neighborhood cats and outdoor cats in neighborhoods in Waco and other communities, but so far we've been pretty successful working with our partners and the volunteers to keep that pretty much under control. We've got a couple of situations right now where there's some folks that are feeding a large group of cats in a neighborhood, and the neighborhood's complaining, and I think that one's going to be a little bit of a challenge. But we've got some really capable people on the volunteer side, and I think that if they focus on it, they'll be able to handle that one successfully. In the midst of all this, we had a very traditional animal control group that was just writing citations and just picking up animals and bringing them to the shelter. We shifted that focus to getting animal control hooked up with the volunteer groups to the point now where the animal control is actually leaning on and in some cases leading the volunteer groups in outreach and public education programs. All have been very successful. But it was an interesting transition because animal control was, as I mentioned, very traditional, and they resisted that change. We brought in a couple of experts, one lady out of Austin that had some success with her programs, and she worked with them for about 3 months. And initially they didn't like anything she told them to do, but it eventually took hold, and she left us with a pretty good program. And they took it and expanded their volunteer groups, and now they have some options available to them they didn't have before. Our council, in the middle of this, not only did they adopt that ordinance, but they gave us a $100,000 grant to provide low-cost spay-neuter and to support our TNR program. And then since we've been able to get some grants through ABC, through our animal birth control clinic, to do the same thing. So now our animal control officers have not just their citation book, but they have vouchers. They have all kinds of, gifts that they can give people that haven't had the tools they need to take care of their animals, and they can provide a lot of education to them, and they do more of that now than they do enforcement. We have done very little enforcement of the spay-neuter side of our ordinance. Most of it has been voluntary compliance. Well, I'd say 99% of it has been voluntary compliance through our voucher program that the council gave us the money for. And we've had that $100,000 for now 2 years in a row. And then this last bullet point about working with community partners, I've kind of already touched on that, but I can't count the times that I've got to complain about outdoor cats that I'll pick up the phone and call the person that heads up that volunteer group. She is a professor at Baylor, and they get right on it, work with animal control, and I usually never get a call back of a complaint. I think when the people that are complaining understand why we're doing what we're doing and what the other options are if we didn't do it this way, they're very supportive, and I think that's been pretty successful. Okay, and here's the proof of how successful we've been. If you look at our intake statistics, I think we so far in 2014, that is a number as of about April 1st. So we're really hoping we'll be under 1,000 for the year of 2014. We should be, but sometimes things can accelerate a little bit in the summer. But we've had a drastic reduction in intake. When you look at and this is just cats, when you look at the shelter intake, all animals, initially, as I mentioned, I think it was about 10,300 in 2011-12. 12-13, it dropped to about 7,600. And then this past year, it was 6,700, I believe. And when you look at Waco and the surrounding communities and our ability to absorb animals, how many we can adopt, how many we can rescue out, and the things that our other supporters can do to help us get animals out of there alive into good homes, we think we really need to get below 6,000 to sustain our no-kill status. And so we're working to get down there with our spay-neuter programs, with our TNR programs for cats, and with all of our partners. And one of the things that we also had some great success with, here's a picture of our first spay-neuter microchip, clinic. Is a voucher microchip clinic, and we set up actually across the street from the police department. We had great support from the police department and from all of our volunteers. That's Carrie Keel in the hoodie. She is the executive director of the Animal Birth Control Clinic. And one of our key volunteers there, Misty Gonzalez, working together. And we had 100 microchips and then a pretty good supply of vouchers. And we ran out of microchips 30 minutes before we were actually supposed to start. We started early because the line was early and administered all the microchips within an hour and a half, and ran out. But we took names of everybody, and we got all the rest of them done over the next couple of weeks. We've run several of those clinics since then. They've been very successful, and these are no-cost microchip clinics. Our council's really strong and supportive about reaching out to the community and doing the things that we've got to do to turn this around. They gave me and the city manager some really great support and clear direction about what they wanted done with this shelter, and it's been very successful. And we've far exceeded our own expectations. And really, it all started with the perspective that Target Zero brought to town, that there's a different way to do this, and it's been great working with them and getting this the success that we've had. And then this is Dundee, the cat at the shelter my wife and I have been wanting to adopt for a long time. But he kind of runs the shelter, and he's one of about 30 or 40 cats that we have that are loose at the shelter. They've all been taken care of and very gentle, and he goes from intake to the cat room to up front to the adoption center and pretty much anywhere he wants to go. And I think he kind of exemplifies the friendly side of our shelter and all the positive work we've been able to do. And with that, I'm ready to take some questions.
Okay, thanks, Wiley. Yes, we have a lot of questions. So as promised, we're going to have a long question-answer session. If you have something you want to ask Wiley, please submit your question now. So we'll take the first question. And here we go. What tips do you have for working with other city managers and administrators who believe programs like this one are illegal or ineffectual? How can we get them on board?
Well, when we told our 15 partner cities that we needed new contracts with them, this may be a little bit brutal, but we just said, unless you adopt our new ordinance, we're not going to sign a contract with you. And we made it, but we softened that quite a bit. I didn't walk in there with that tough a stance. I explained to them the experience that I'd had at the shelter and how important it was to our entire community for the shelter to be successful and for us to stop the euthanasia that we had been doing. And pretty much of them, we had to do a few tours, but they've been very, very supportive, and most of them have reached out inside their community, and they find volunteers and supporters there, and have been able to do some of the same things we've done. But it was, I guess it was easier for us to get them on board because none of these cities really have the resources to run a shelter on their own, and so we were kind of a last and first resort for them. But they've all gotten on board. I wouldn't know how to deal with one that thinks that what we're doing is illegal or ineffectual, but I can just tell you the group around here, it has, how they prioritize this is extremely varied. Some of them think this is the greatest thing in the world, and they're very supportive of us. Others think they just don't have a choice, so they do it anyway. But for the most part, they are all very supportive, and they're coming around. Not only have they supported us from the standpoint of the ordinance and the spay-neuter initiatives we got going on, but they are also, we're raising money to completely renovate our shelter, and the cities around us have committed through their contributions toward the shelter an additional $240,000 for our capital campaign. So they've all stepped in to help us build or renovate the existing shelter and bring it in line with our efforts. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, great. Thank you. Here's the next question. Oh, and by the way, folks in the audience, we do have Dr. Julie Levy on board with us tonight. If there's something that you would like to ask her, and she may jump in on some of these questions and give you her opinion or her experience on this thing. So here's the next question. What has been the impact on citizen complaints with this new policy? Gone up, gone down, stayed the same?
Well, I think they've gone way down. However, the complaints we get these days have a higher expectation about resolution than they used to. Because we've had some success, I guess the citizens expect us to be able to perform miracles. And we, as I mentioned earlier, we have a few issues in some of our neighborhoods with outdoor cats, and those are going to be a challenge to resolve. But there's no question but that the complaints have gone down, but the expectations have risen. And one of the things we did, I failed to mention, we have a 752 spay number that citizens can call that did two things for us. It got a lot of animal control-related calls off of our dispatch center, and it takes them directly into animal control and rolls those voicemails up into their email, and they can manage those and deal with them a whole lot better. And most of that is people wanting a voucher or wanting some assistance with transporting an animal because they don't have transportation or something like that. But all of that outreach has improved the relationship between our animal control operation and our citizens, and drastically lowered the number of complaints. Now, when we do get a complaint, they're a little tougher to deal with because it's something that is somewhat unusual. Somebody has a bunch of animals because they've been trying to help animals that wander up to their house, and they get overwhelmed and they don't have the resources to take care of them. We've had a few of those situations, and we've had some where we have kind of the so many animals in one location that creates some health concerns, and we're just trying to deal with those the best we can, and we're looking at some slight amendments to our ordinance to improve our ability to deal with those things.
Excellent. Let's take the next question. What changes have you made in terms of non-feral cats for social cats and dogs? I'm assuming we're talking about community cats. They're friendly but may not have a home.
Well, if they're friendly, we bring them to the shelter. We actually have a shortage of cats at the shelter most of the time now for adoption. My nephew and his family tried to go to the shelter and adopt a kitten about 3 weeks ago, and they couldn't. We didn't have one for them. The last time I checked, I think we had less than 10 cats at the shelter. But they may be up a little bit because we had an elderly couple that had done what I mentioned earlier. They had brought quite a few animals into their home, and they were both in their late 80s, early 90s. They got where they couldn't take care of them, and we went in and took took all the animals out, and I think 10 or 12 of those were cats. But last time I checked, I think most of those are gone now. They've already been adopted out. So we don't have a problem with getting social cats out of there. If they can be adopted, I think we've been very successful about getting them out of there. The only cats we've had to put down lately are the ones that are terribly ill or they've been injured in a car accident or something like that. I don't think we've had to put a cat down that was healthy in quite a while.
Okay, thank you. Let's have another question. Could you explain more specifically what the programs were you adopted, including the recommendations Target Zero Institute made for Waco?
Well, specifically, Target Zero, when Rick Ducharme was here in December of 2012, and he addressed our Animal Welfare Alliance group, he said, stop taking the community cats. And there are alternatives to intake there, and I had never heard such a thing, and I was having difficulty grasping it, but fortunately there were some folks that had some experience with that around Waco, and they explained it to me, and we were able to develop those programs. But that's the initial recommendation they made to us, and then when we drafted our ordinance and we put the language in there about how we were going to deal with, well, at that time we were calling them ferals, how we were going to deal with them, they reviewed that and made some great recommendations to clean that up. And that ordinance is on our website, our City of Waco website. It's available for anybody to look at. And so I think that's what they did to us. And then for us, and then they sent 2 of their veterinarians to Waco to walk through the shelter and help us develop standard operating procedures for the shelter, which really helped us establish a better health protocol, intake protocols for animals. We did have the last 6 or 8 months, the Humane Society ran the shelter. They had a number of health scares with the animals coming out of the shelter, and it doesn't take but just a few of those, and you're not going to move any animals out of there. And we were able to turn all that around. But they did 3 really good things. They made the suggestion about cats initially. They helped us with the ordinance. And then they sent the veterinarians in to help us establish standard operating procedures.
This is Julie, and I'd like to give a shout-out to the folks at Target Zero. Our program at the University of Florida has worked very closely with this group, which is also from Florida. And they've been extremely successful in helping communities create this almost astounding overnight change that Waco is a good example of. And the greatest thing about Target Zero is their services are free if your community is accepted into their program. And if you would like more information about Target Zero, they have a great website with case studies, including more details about Waco. And the website address is targetzero.org.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Levy. So here's a short question, probably has a long answer, but what is an intact animal license?
We were, before I was ever involved in the shelter, it's been about 5 years ago, we were having so much trouble with strays, and our animal control officers were overwhelmed that we decided that if you wanted to keep your animal intact, then you had to have a license for that. And one of the local breeders here, which has been down, he's pretty wise when it comes to animal-related ordinances, came to the council meeting and sat next to me. And like I said, I wasn't tuned out about the issue, but the animal shelter was really not my issue. And he leaned over and told me, he said, this whole intact animal license is going to be a huge failure. And he said, because the only people that are going to get the license are the people that are already in compliance with the ordinance and already taking care of their animals and doing all the right things, keeping them under a veterinarian's care. He said the people that are not doing any of those things are not going to get the license. Well, what we found out was The only time people bought a license is when we picked up their animal and they wanted to keep it intact so they could get it away from the shelter, and they'd pay for $35 for a license. And we sold about 250 licenses in 1 year. Of course, our estimates are we have about 60,000 animals in Waco. So it was a complete failure. And when we started looking at a new ordinance, I called this breeder. He's a pretty good guy, and I told him what I was fixing to do, and that I was going to work on this ordinance, and I'd appreciate his help. And I said, "Do you remember that council meeting when you told me it was going to be a failure?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." And I said, "Well, you were right. It was a huge failure." And but we were charging $35 for somebody that wanted to keep their animal intact, and if you didn't have that license, you were supposed to have your animal fixed. And it didn't work. We didn't follow up with it well. We didn't have protocols at the shelter in place to support it, and it was not well thought out or well implemented. So I hope I answered the question, what is an animal intact license?
Yes, I understand now. Okay, here's another question, Wiley. Can you tell a specific story that really made you know this was working?
Well,
I may have put you on the spot here.
Well, I can tell you, I'm going to tell you two stories, if that's okay. I went to the shelter about 3 weeks in one morning. I spent a lot of time there right off the bat because I knew it was going to be a huge challenge. I was on a steep learning curve, and they were having a staff meeting in intake, and the lady said, I remember the supervisor said, "Remember, everybody needs to be here early in the morning." So after the meeting was over, I asked one staff person, "Why does everybody need to be here early in the morning?" She said, "Well, we have to dispose of the animals, the euthanized animals." And I said, "Well, I probably ought to experience that." So I wore blue jeans to work the next day, and I went over there and helped them do that. Well, I was slightly motivated before that time, but I was really motivated after that. That was one of the toughest things I've ever done. And so now that is a very unusual occurrence, and the animals that we do have to dispose of, they were, I think, with very few exceptions, there were no options to euthanasia. And I think of all the things that we've done over there, that's what the turnaround that I'm most proud of.
Great. Thank you, Wiley. Could you speak up a little bit? We've had somebody say that you're getting softer on us. Here's the next question. What would you like to see happen next? What could make this even better for Waco's animals?
Well, we've had a very successful fundraising campaign. We still lack a little bit of funds, but I think we're close enough. We have already hired an architect, and we're going to completely renovate this shelter, which means tearing down some 1950s kennels and rebuilding them to some modern kennels that will be conditioned. Air will be conditioned, and I think that's what I want to see happen next. I want to see that go in. I want to see our clinic go in at the shelter. We have an excellent veterinarian that came on board about 2 months ago, and I want to see those things come together, but mostly it's the project to rebuild that shelter, because that shelter was worn out 20 years ago. And so we need to get that done, and I think we'll be in a position then. I tell everybody we have great partners. We have this great partnership with all these rescues, the Humane Society partnership, and our citizens are a big part of that partnership. And we have a great ordinance and support from our city council. The third thing that we need is a shelter that is in line with the support and the progress that we've made everywhere else, that can support our continued no-kill. So that's what I want to see happen. I want to see that shelter get built, and certainly before I leave the city, I want to get to see that shelter get built.
And it sounds like you'll do it too. Here's our next question. How do you handle owner surrenders? Do you manage intake with appointments? Yes,
we do. That's another suggestion that Target Zero made, and we have a great intake manager, and she schedules all the surrenders. We do charge for an owner surrender, and we've caught some flack about that. But we feel strongly that those that want to bring an animal and surrender it should participate in the continued care of that animal. And we've been successful with that. We do have a few donors and supporters that obviously if someone walks in and they clearly do not have the funds to surrender an animal, they picked it up on the street, they're trying to do the right thing, we do have a little bit of flexibility with that. But for, say, 99% of the animals that are surrendered, there's a fee associated with the surrender, and we think that's the right way to do it. I know that's subject of a lot of discussion, but that's the way we feel like it's important to do it that way.
Okay, thank you. How did you educate, train, and communicate this new program philosophy with your staff and volunteers? Specifics would be helpful.
Well, I guess it just kind of took on its own momentum. We, as I mentioned, we engaged a lady from Austin that had success with spay neuter outreach, and she came in to retask our animal control officers. And she recommended that we establish a volunteer group, and she put together some protocols, and we established that volunteer group, and put together some walking talks and knocking talks, and equipped these people with vouchers and some other handouts, dog feeding bowls, all the things that you need to help get someone's attention and be positive. And then they developed a specific program around that. We call it Space Street Waco, funded by our council. In our budget, an extra $100,000 to fund that. And what happened was the animal control officers who were not well thought of in the community, the way they were perceived in the community rapidly changed. As I mentioned, we do not write a lot of citations. Most of the people that we run into don't have the resources to deal with bringing their animal into compliance, and we do. And so why would they prefer a citation over a voucher to fix their animal, get it microchipped, and bring it into full compliance? And then the next time if we were to pick it up, it gets loose again, we're going to take it home. We don't want it at the shelter. They don't want it at the shelter. And many of these people that we work with do not have the resources to pay the citation anyway. So we're just kind of spinning our wheels if we did it any other way. But it kind of took on a life of its own. Our animal control officers, it took them about 60 days for their eyes to open and all of a sudden say, wow, this is a whole lot better for us. And then the volunteers tripled our staffing at animal control, and with this different approach, and it's been very successful. We have one, volunteer coordinator that Misty Gonzalez, that is an animal lover, and she does this on her own time and tracks the statistics, tracks the spay neuter, pays the bills with our funding, and so it's just a great group of folks that really put a program together. I didn't do it; they did, and it's very successful. But again, the council seeded it. The council supported it. We have a mayor. I haven't mentioned our mayor that meets with the volunteers on a regular basis. His family has a history of supporting the animal shelter in Waco. They built a number of the newer buildings over there, and they are major contributors to this new campaign. And his mother was a big supporter of the animal shelter, and he has taken this on as a mission since he became mayor. It's really nice to have a mayor standing in front of you, making sure things go well for you and providing you the support that you need.
Excellent. Thank you. I'd like to announce that for those of you that want the link, want the website for Target Zero, it is www.target-zero.org. That's www.target-zero.org. So our next question is, and I'm getting to it here. Let's see. Did your program include shelter, neuter, return, or return to field programs? If so, how did you handle implementation of this program and concerns surrounding returning cats to an area where there is no known caregiver?
Yeah, we on the outdoor community cats, we don't ever take them to the shelter. We take them straight to our animal birth control clinic. They do the neuter and the vaccinations and the ear tip, and then they're returned to where we got them. We don't relocate them. We are having some issues, as I mentioned, in some neighborhoods that may not work. So we're going to have to find probably a little bit different approach there. But we keep them out of the shelter because we don't have a facility to neuter them at the shelter. We're working on that. But they go straight to ABC, and ABC takes care of them. And sometimes we provide transportation, but the community cat volunteers and we have a McLennan Animal Rescue Coalition that is big on cats, and they'll provide volunteers to return the animals.
Hey, Wiley, I think they also may have been interested in whether there is a TNR program for cats that are already in the shelter. For example, if someone, and maybe the strays just never come in, but if you do end up with a stray in the shelter and it's too shy for adoption, are those cats then also sent to the neuter clinic to be neutered and put back in their neighborhood?
Yes, they are. And there's probably 30 to 40 community cats at the shelter, and all of them have been trapped and fixed, and we feed them every day and take care of them at the shelter. They're all over the place over there, but we've really cleaned up the environment for them, and it's not an issue for us now. It was for a while when I first got involved. It was an issue, but yeah, but any socialized cat that comes in there, we're going to fix it before it's either adopted out or returned. And if we end up with a feral there, then we will take care of it and get it fixed and try to send it back where it came from. But if not, it just stay at the shelter.
Okay, so Wiley, we have some audience members that would like to know what your website address is for the Waco shelter.
Okay, well, it's our City of Waco address. It's www.waco-texas.com. And it is, it's a website for the entire city, but you can see animal shelter on there, and you can see animal control. And I believe the ordinance sits in animal control. I mean, if anybody needs a copy of the ordinance, they can, if you can forward their email to me, I'll email a copy of the ordinance to them.
Okay, great. So here's the next question. How did you bring the public on board with this?
Well, when this is it's kind of a big thing. This is. I guess our transition really started after the council adopted the ordinance. Our ordinance became effective October 1st of 2013, 10 months after we took over operation of the shelter. For 90 days, we hit the airways. We have our own public access cable channel, high definition, by the way, and we did a lot of public service announcements. We pushed those out to the local TV and radio stations, did them in Spanish and English, and we did not go into any enforcement whatsoever until January 1st. of 2014. And then we really didn't kick off our Space Street Waco program or our grant program until about March 1st. And our target with that program was about 1,800 additional spay neuters. And we still, even though we were almost halfway through the year, we still met that target with that grant money. But over those 3 months after we did the ordinance became effective, we just blitzed the airways. The newspaper jumped in with us. We wrapped our animal control trucks with Space Street Waco. Very friendly. We were in the process of changing the image of our animal control officers, and the public really accepted it well. I get a few complaints every now and then about taxpayer funded, but when I explained to them the cost of operating the shelter and that this is the only way to start stabilizing that cost, they're usually on board. But the public has been very supportive, and I don't. We talk to community groups all the time, and we don't get anything but positive feedback. But when your mayor and your council step up and say they want this done, and this is what had been going on at that shelter, or the results from that shelter previously were an embarrassment to our community. People step up, and we haven't had any major complaints from the public or people speaking against what we're doing.
So, Wiley, since you haven't had any problems with the public, do you encounter any cultural barriers or conflicts with regard to spay-neuter? And if so, how did you handle them?
Well, yes, we have. I mean, I don't have the specifics on that. I know heard reports, and I kind of watched them watched our volunteers work at one of our microchip clinics, and amazingly, when an animal control officer explains it to a person that's got a pit bull that wants that pit bull to stay intact, what they have to do to keep it intact, about 50% of them will make sure the animal is seen by a veterinarian and is microchipped and meets the ordinance, because we don't require everything to be spay-neutered. If you have your animal under a veterinarian's care, you got some kind of health statement from the veterinarian, and the animal's microchipped, even though it's intact, it's in compliance. But if you don't want to do those things, or you haven't done those things, and we pick the animal up, then we're going to fix it before we return it back to you. And the folks that when they see what the options are, they will either get their animal brought into compliance, spend the money to do it, or they'll accept a voucher and get them fixed. There are some, and I don't know how to exactly touch on that, but there are some cultural barriers in Waco, and we have two bilingual people that work on our volunteer group, and they've been pretty successful talking to people. Once they understand it, they'll either bring them into compliance with a veterinarian, or they'll bring them into compliance by having them fixed and chipped.
Excellent. Here's the next question. Actually, it doesn't want to push to the audience, but I'll read it. Do you have any safety net programs that help keep animals from being brought into the shelter? And if so, can you elaborate on them?
Yeah, we have and I'm not the expert on it, but we have the PASS program again that Target Zero recommended to us, the positive alternatives to surrender. And part of the when somebody calls to make an appointment for surrender, they're given those some incentives and some education about how they could potentially keep their animal instead of surrendering it. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's what they mean, Wiley.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and we do that, and we've had varied levels of success, but I think the really strong component of that is the schedules, the appointment to surrender, because when we when we take the appointment, we explain this to them, or our staff does, and we can either, usually, well, there are some that will reconsider and keep the animal, and then we try to follow up with them and provide them some support, and then sometimes our volunteers will call on them.
Okay, here's another question. Do local vets do the surgeries paid for with the vouchers? If so, how did you negotiate rates with them?
We had one local vet that was helping us, and she was doing it not quite as inexpensive as our animal birth control clinic was doing it, but we, in our initial stages of our Space Street outreach, we overwhelmed animal birth control clinic, and so we had a local veterinarian that stepped up and did several hundred surgeries for us while we were getting the program up and running. But we do not have any local vets doing surgeries for us now, other than those vets that work at ABC.
Okay.
And it is all about the rates.
Yes. If there is a complaint about outside cats, feral cat colonies where all the cats are already spayed and neutered in particular, what would the volunteers and cat organizations do?
Well, that's kind of where we are with the two particular incidents that we're trying to deal with now. A lot of the animals, at least in one of these locations, they're fixed. And there's just too many of them there, and it's in a neighborhood. The houses are close quarters, and that's what I'm going to our volunteers with, and hoping that they can come up with a way to address that, because there's not many options when you get into a situation like that, particularly when the neighbors can make a case that this is a health and welfare situation. So I'm gonna have to be dealing with. I've got a council member that's asking me to come up with some solutions there, and a city manager that's looking at me like, I hope you can. And so we're going to be working on that the next couple of weeks. I really don't have an answer for that.
Okay. Here's one you probably do have an answer for. What kind of reservations did the animal control officers have about the changes?
Well, it was kind of funny. We the lady that we hired to do it was not very diplomatic with them very initially, and they really didn't. Even if they liked what she was telling them to do, they didn't want to do it because she was telling them to do it. And so it was kind of interesting. But as it turned out, they had a couple of really positive experiences in the field with this new approach, and that's what turned them around. But they had huge reservations. There was a lot of resistance, and but I've mentioned to you, I've been with the city a long time, and I've worked in lots of different operations and supervised a lot of people that don't want to do what they're being told they need to do. And sometimes you kind of got to get their attention so that they'll start paying attention. And I did have to do that. I did have to get real firm with them about it, and it worked. They eventually took the bait, started doing it the right way. But they had huge reservations. Mostly, they didn't want to change. They liked what they were doing. They liked the routine. Unbelievably, they liked writing citations, even though very few citations were paid and very few people put in their appearances at municipal court. So it was kind of not a good use of the resource. And I think once they saw that they were being much more productive this other way, then they got on board. But I didn't get much cooperation initially.
Okay, here's another question. What was your biggest challenge in making this policy switch? From the citizens, the city, animal control, the media, rescue groups?
Well, we have two rescues in Waco that are high profile that raise funds, and they did not get along with Humane Society running the animal shelter. There was a lot of, I guess, conflict between the two groups there, and we had to. As the council was considering what to do with the shelter prior to the city even taking it over, those groups made numerous appearances at our hearing of visitors at the council meetings, telling the council that there was a better way to do what we were doing. And so as we were negotiating the new contract with Humane Society, we got all the groups together, and our city manager at the time kind of read the riot act to them and said, either we're all going to work together and get this done, or we're never going to get any better. And there was some negotiation back and forth with how we would make animals available to these rescue groups. And when we decided that it was worthwhile to us to waive all the fees and all the investment we had in the animals to move them alive to a responsible rescue, then things started improving. And that got the Humane Society, the other rescue groups, and all the rescue groups around here working. As far as the media goes, I think when they saw the numbers getting better on euthanasia at the shelter, then they jumped on board and wrote a number of positive stories about the shelter. Animal control jumped on board, as I mentioned, when they finally realized that this was a better way to do it, and it actually made their job better. Citizens were generally supportive from the beginning. Those that were paying attention, there was a large group that weren't, which was kind of our target audience. But the city was very supportive. Our management group was supportive, and of course the council and the mayor were the key to the whole thing.
Okay, great. We're going to take two more questions tonight. And here's the first one. Can you share how you were successfully able to mediate neighbor concerns with community cats? How do you manage disgruntled members of the community that do not approve of cats free roaming on their property?
I don't know that I've successfully done that yet.
Okay.
we have, we've had some very high-profile restaurants and gathering places in Waco that had community cat issues, and we went over there. Our volunteers went over there and worked with them, and we got those issues resolved. They may not be 100% happy with it, but they know what the alternative was, so they're living with the results of TNR, and that's made things better for them. But the disgruntled members of the community and the neighbors' concerns with community cats, that's exactly the two issues that we're going to be trying to deal with right now, and I'd like to hear from somebody that does know how to successfully deal with that, because that's what I need help with.
Okay, great. Here's a question, and then I may have told a fib earlier. We'll have one more after this.
Yeah.
What data or statistics do you think is most meaningful for city officials or animal control to get them on board willingly?
Well, there's a lot of things, but animal control was just a change in their perception in the community when they went from working with people and trying to help them bring their animals into compliance to from writing citations to that. And I think that was a huge difference there. Our city officials, some of our folks in the police department, our animal control operation is currently in the police department. I'm going to move that animal control operation out of PD and to the shelter when we get the shelter renovated. I don't have space for them over there right now, and they're excited about that. But some of the police department, they would make fun of me about the things that I was trying to do at the shelter, but when they saw the results and they saw the impact on the animal control operation, and then they saw the impact on their officers, I think they came on board. And we've had a couple of domestic situations with child abuse and I guess some family domestic challenges where there were animals involved, and because we were able to go in there and successfully remove the animals and take that off the police department, I think that made a big difference for them.
Excellent. Dr. Levy, do you have anything you'd like to add to this conversation before we go into our closing remarks?
Well, I would encourage everyone to go to the Target Zero website and read the full story of Waco. It is inspiring. This was not a small gain that they made. This was monumental and almost overnight, going from a very challenged shelter to one of the leading shelters for life-saving in the country. And as Wiley explained, it's not because they have a pretty shelter, it's not because they have a lot of money or a wealthy community. They did this just because they decided to serve their community differently, and it was a big win for cats.
Excellent. Excellent. You'll all notice that there's a link up on your screen. We'd like for you to take our evaluation survey if you have a few minutes. That's the end of our event tonight. We want to thank Wiley, Dr. Levy, and all of you for your time tonight. We invite you to take a few minutes to complete the survey. Your feedback is important to us. Click on the link on your screen, or for some reason, if you don't see the link, it is in the resource file at the bottom of your screen, and the link will also be emailed to you in a few days. This webcast will be available on demand shortly, and we hope you will share this presentation on your social sites. We hope you can join us for the next 4 webcasts of the Million Cat Challenge key initiatives that will help change the sheltering world. Thanks again for being here with us this evening, and good night.